Tell you what,
no
they've been
pressure.
treating like kids. No pressure at all.
Right.
Good morning. Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Comeau, with my co-host, Joseph Haytas, and our special guest, Michael Golick, who is my former client, eligible parolee at that time, now free because he did all the work that Joe and I talk about your loved ones needing to do, and he did it. So I would like to start with him. Good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Elizabeth and Joseph.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Michael, why don't you tell the audience about your journey? A lot of times we have loved ones on here who, they have their loved ones are incarcerated thinking they're never getting out and all this stuff. So why don't you go ahead and tell the audience sort of a Reader's Digest version of your story?
All right. Well, it started out, I had a rough childhood that helped me develop a lot of bad habits that as I grew up, I chose not to face. It was easier just to live in those habits and, just live them and not face problems. So all that did was exasperate everything I was going through, and it built my anger, my frustration, my rage, as it were, and led me into a very serious gambling addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So one night, I ran up a gambling debt I couldn't pay. And as a result, I killed a man. I chose to pull a gun on somebody and the manager of the card room, and I killed him. And for that, I served 26 years out of a 40 to life sentence. And for the first 11 or 12 years in prison, I didn't see any way out. I didn't see any hope in the future. So I just kept on with the anger and the rage and the frustration until somebody just told me, hey, Mike, if you're trying to kill yourself and keep getting in fights and doing all this stupid stuff, there's easier ways. If you want to do something better, here, go talk to this guy. And he hooked me up with one of the counselors there. So I did that, and things started changing. Started seeing changes in my outlook. And it was really in a victim's impact awareness class that change took hold. Talking to the lady that came in about the murder of her daughter and her unborn grandchild just brought me to tears. And I started really seeing the damage that I caused to my victim's family. I mean, yes, my victim had died at my hand, but the damage I did to his family was beyond the scope of horror that I could imagine. And, that's something I have to live with every day. So, but, it's thanks to people like Joseph and Elizabeth and all these other people in my life that actually cared about me that helped me change. And over the past 15 years, I've been on a voyage of recovery and rehabilitation. And for anybody who is taking this journey, I will promise you three things. One, it's not going to be easy. Two, it's not going to be pleasant. And three, in the end, it will be worth it if you embrace it. That's what got me out here. That's why I'm sitting here looking out at the view over Los Angeles right now, instead of in a prison cell or dorm somewhere rotting away. But it all came down to internalization and accountability. And I can't emphasize that enough. So, Joe, Elizabeth?
Yes.
You have anything to add?
Oh, sure we do. And I was thinking too, I was thinking a bunch of things, but I got distracted. Grown woman, she had to have a new puppy. My dog died. I was telling Joe that my two dogs died in May. I don't know if I told you that, Michael, or not.
No.
Yeah, and one of them was only 3 years old. And so instead of drinking and using drugs, I decided to do a replacement therapy, which was puppy therapy. And that has worked so great. However,
That is
it's
awesome.
obviously a lot of work to pay attention to what's going on around him. So that's why, if you see me fidgeting, that's why. And I do apologize to anyone watching as to why I am distracted. And it's not because of the topic, because I actually love the topic today. And I love it when my clients come on the show and share their stories. And one of the things I wanted to tell the audience is that humble makes is for the win. Okay. Humble. If your loved ones cannot get that concept, they're not going to go anywhere usually, or stay free, because that's another important lesson. So, and Michael's just one of those humble guys, and that's why I invited him on here. He's extremely insightful. He did the work. He learned his lesson after the first denial and said, okay, I got this. I can do this. And he really put the work in. He even created his own workbook for fellow inmates, and he's getting that published. It's really excellent. He did it based on what, the things that helped him. So we can share that at the end. Michael, remember to let people know what's going on with that.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that he talked about, which is kind of segues to this show, is Joe's strategy 8, which is know and work the 12 steps. And I always tell my client, know and work 12 steps. Why do I tell you that? Because almost every question you could point to one of these steps as to what the commissioners are driving at. So either they're talking about accountability or insight or remorse or some of those concepts, spreading the message to others, etc. And this, I would think you would agree with me, Michael, on that. And then before we jump into the chapter, did you have any questions, Joe, for Michael about his journey process, getting out? We always like to know what the process is like getting out of there, because we don't really know. We get the grant of parole and the release memo, and we don't really know what happens after that.
Yeah, no, I'm just fascinated by Michael's story and how he kind of engaged in the process. Listening to him, especially after his denial, and then he embraced the things he needed to do and went forward from there. He wasn't in denial or anything like that. He went for it, and that's great. And I'm sure not only did he internalize those things, but he did, but he's carrying those things with him, it seems, back into the free community to get a jump start on not only surviving, but hopefully someday soon thriving. And that's what it's all about leading a better life, and finding your purpose on why God put you on this earth.
And that's absolutely it. I mean, one of the things I've learned going through the 12 steps, for me, step 1 was the hardest. Asking for help. I got to a point where I did recognize that my life was so far out of control that I was bordering on insanity. And I had to go to a place where I was afraid of. I had to swallow my pride, humble myself before God, man, and everybody else, and just say, hey, I need help. I can't do this. Not by myself. And for so much of my life, I feared being seen as weak in front of other people. Coming from an abusive household as a kid, any weakness was preyed on. And that was a hard lesson I had to learn, was that not everybody's out to get you. If you honestly ask for help, there's people to help you, people that care. So, finally getting over that hurdle was a major step in my life. And, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you guys. I'd still be sitting in a prison cell somewhere if I couldn't find that humility and that strength. And people don't understand. When you make yourself vulnerable to opening up to others and asking for help and facing your challenges, there is no greater strength than that. And I mean, some people say, well, that doesn't make sense. How can vulnerability be a strength? But it's one of the strongest things we can ever do. And don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. Because without humility, without vulnerability, we're stuck in a rut. We're just spinning our wheels.
Wow, absolutely. Being vulnerable, there's something about being vulnerable that the people with a heart who see that, they want to help when you make yourself vulnerable. I think for the most part,
Yeah.
Being vulnerable is very in the context that you were in. I think that is so important, and the realization of that as well. The realization that being vulnerable is okay, because you come from a place where you're basically in some ways a blank slate to the new life you're becoming, and being vulnerable lets people in. Being vulnerable and, like you said, humble, it's like you're giving people permission to help you in a way, in an unspoken way. So I think that's very important, and that's a place you're coming from.
Thank you. Yeah. There's my journey through the 12 steps. I've done groups like CGA. I did Celebrate Recovery, Gamblers Anonymous. And at the end of the day, I find that every morning I get up and I ask for help. It may not be with my addiction, if I'm, not struggling with that. It may just be getting through the day. Because ever since I've been out here, everything's a challenge. It's a whole new set of challenges. Prison was miserable, but even out here in the free world, there's challenges that are going to try us every day. And, it's like the other day, I was headed across town, and LA's a very big place, monstrous. Yeah. And I got lost 4 times trying to find the right bus. So, but it's that step one lesson that I learned. Yeah.
Been there, done that, especially when I was new to LA, when I first got out here. So I can relate.
Yeah. And it's that step one lesson. I humbled myself and found somebody and asked for help. And even if they didn't know, I was able to get directions to the next person who might know.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I find myself falling back all the way to the beginning every day and then going through. But the end all be all of my day is when I finally get to step 12 during the course of my day. And, the biggest lesson I got from that is I have a firm belief. Self-help and recovery have to be selfish while you're in it. When you're working through the steps, trying to get yourself to where you are stable enough to function in society. It has to be selfish. And people say, oh, well, selfish, that's bad. No, in this circumstance, you can't help anybody else unless you can help yourself. And if we can't succeed in our recovery, then how are we going to be valued to anybody? So that's why we have to be selfish while we are learning to be better people. But then we hit step 12. And there's only one way to hold on to everything that I've learned, and that's to give it away. Turn around, I'll sit down and I'll have discussions with people, even in the house here, about various recovery topics, about my journey, about everything it took me to get out here. And I'm discovering that no matter how far our journeys are apart, there's so much alike too. So, the big message I have here is don't give up. Take anything anybody has to offer you that's going to lead you in a positive direction and learn from it. And then when you get to that spot to where your heart is full, you're happy, you're finally the person that you are destined to be, turn around to give it to the next man and the next man and the next man. Because if you give it to two people and they give it to two people and they give it to two people, one of these days the world's going to be a better place.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I wanna hear more. I mean, that's fantastic.
Sorry, I screwed up. Yeah, that's awesome. That's so awesome. It's just so on point to the topic today, especially like you talked about step 12, you talked about step 8. I mean, it's integrated into naturally a conversation that you have internalized. It's not a script, it's a lifestyle that I want all of the audience who have loved ones in prison about how that works. It's not about memorizing those steps. It's really embodying the steps and learning that they can transform your life much the same, or your loved one's life much the same as it did for Michael as well. You like step 1, you talked about, the hardest, but do you have one that's something that was after that pivotal to your journey?
Yeah, when we get to step 5, confessing our wrongs before God and man, that was really hard. But I tell you what, when I fully committed to finishing my 5th step and just let everything out truthfully, transparently, and without fear or shame, I felt like 1,000 pounds had been lifted off my shoulders.
Wow.
I mean, I can't tell you guys how important it is that when you finally get to step 5, don't half-ass it. Don't just try to get through it because it's painful. Don't try to get through it because you're ashamed. Feel the emotions. Feel them, embrace them. Because to start this process of healing and growth, we have to walk through the fire. We have to burn these things away. We have to burn away the shame and the fear and the guilt. And we have to, I can't express the importance of this. We have to be accountable. Without accountability, we're just faking it. It's this accountability that helps us build the insight we need to understand where we were, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And as accountable as I've been in the last 15 years of my life, I wake up some mornings and go, holy crap, I forgot about that. And I'll go sit down and talk with somebody, say, hey, you know what? I was going through some stuff and I just remembered when I was this age. It's like in my book that I wrote, one of the things I talked about was shoplifting from this mom and pop store. And, in the book I talk about it quite a bit, but it's those little memories that pop up like that we think are insignificant that are sometimes the most important, because they show us how we were developing those patterns, but they also show us the damage we caused to the people in our lives. and the people that we victimized. I mean, looking back, this mom or pop store, I think, oh yeah, I never shoplifted more than a couple of dollars at a time. But now you take that, I do it 300 days a year, that's $600. Back in the 1980s, which is roughly about $3,500 now in a year, and I did that for a couple of years. Look at how I hurt that family's income. Look at what I did to their insurance rates. Look what I did to their business. Maybe it caused stress in their family. These are things I just can't know, but they're things I have to think about now when I'm being accountable. And, that leads up to, working on making amends and being willing to make amends. I mean, there's no way I will ever be able to make direct amends to these people. They've since passed on. The town I was in changed a lot. So what do? Instead of trying to, make direct amends to them, I make living amends by being a better person, by living my recovery, and I make indirect amends by helping people in need, helping victims of crime. And that's the important thing. It's like one of my new endeavors, I hooked up with a lady called Mama Bear and her family. We're going to be going down and using my peer support training to help with the unhomed population here in Los Angeles, down on Skid Row. And it's little things like that that make everything come together and help us do our amends. And, I jumped from step 5 up to step 9 and step 8. And, the thing is, the 12 steps are so interconnected. You can't do one without the other. So, it's the more you get further you get into the 12 steps, you look back and go, oh, wait a minute, I just stepped on 1 again. I just stepped on 2 again. Oh, well, something's going on here. Let's talk about this. And, I think another thing that's important for all the families and their loved ones to know is that the word chair doesn't want to hear, well, step 5 is this, and this. No, go in there and tell them what step 5 means to you. How do you live step 5? They can recite the steps forward, backwards, upside down. You could ask them for what step 7 is, and they can do it. They know. They've been doing this long enough. They know all the self-help lingo, the jargon, everything inside out, upside down, and backwards. They don't want to hear the jargon. What they want to hear is how we internalize the lessons we've learned from the steps and from our other self-help. And they would rather us not be able to tell them the exact wording of step 7. But that the fact that I'm willing to ask God to take my shortcomings away. And I make myself vulnerable for that. That's what's important. So.
Wow. That's great.
I keep hitting the wrong buttons. I keep removing myself from the stage. The dog ran out the gate, so she was up the hill, so I ran off. But I mean, in the meantime, Michael's given us basically a treatise on how to work the steps.
Yes.
And, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And it's rare. Unfortunately, it's rare. Most of my clients try to memorize their way out instead of, really trying to internalize and live the steps as a lifestyle.
Exactly. That is key. Sometimes clients tell me, oh, I was up till 2 a.m. studying the steps. Listen, man, don't bother. You got to live them, like Michael says.
Well, and that's just the thing. I'd see lifers out in the day room sitting there 6-8 hours a day, 7 days a week, studying the steps, studying self-help to go to board. And then they're heartbroken when they go into that boardroom and get a denial.
Yeah.
Other than a few steps that Elizabeth, not a few steps, but a few things Elizabeth asked me to work on and fine tune, I didn't spend, let's say I spent probably 300 hours putting my packet together simply because it's time consuming. I spent probably 8 or 10 hours working on the specific things Elizabeth wanted me to. The rest of it, I didn't spend any time sitting in a chair studying these steps or anything. I went out on the yard and I lived it. I shared it.
Yeah.
I gave it away. I ran groups. I did everything I could to be that example. And by doing that, I get to live all these things I've learned every day. And that's a big difference. Don't, you know, I don't care how well you study something, how well spoken you are. If you can't go in there and show them that you've internalized this and that you're living it, it's going to be a denial. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And if it's not a denial and you do slip by a commissioner that's, you know, in a better mood that week or whatever it is, that's, or just you put on a nice show for them, you are probably not going to succeed. I've seen so many, what do we call them, Joe? Not reversals, or not reversals, because that's a very technical term, but revocations of guys that relapse. And then when I talk to them and I ask them, you know, did you work the 12 steps before you got granted parole? No.
Yeah, you're talking about the reconsideration hearings. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the correct terminology. And so it's shocking. And they got granted anyway, but they didn't make it. And then they spend the next 3 to 5 years trying to backpedal from that and try to, you know, convince the panel, you know, give me another shot at it. Okay. And so it's so important to really embrace these steps. And there's so much here. Most of my clients, or some of my clients, like, oh, I can't do it because I don't believe in God. But God, you know, can be anything. And in particular for, like, I'm an atheist. It's like, really? You believe that we just were created of nothing? Okay, you can believe that, but don't you have any kind of higher power? And I do find that my atheist clients, if you don't have a belief in the supernatural at all, you are going to struggle to try and get out, because there's just, you don't have any real inspiration for trying to move forward and get out. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll ask them, I'll say, you know what are you looking forward to on getting out? What's your passion? What are you dreaming about? What are you excited about? And there's just nothing there. There's nothing there. They go, oh, just being free and just being with my family. I go, okay, your family is going to get old really fast. They're not going to be with you 24/7. So, well, I just want to work and come home, and then I'm going to, you know, be with my family. It's like, no, your family is going to be busy doing their own stuff most of the time. You're going to get together for this or that or the next thing, barring some unusual circumstances. Some of my guys get out and they're, you know, taking care of grandkids and things like that. But in general, that's not the case. And you probably see that you'll see that in your journey on the outside too, Michael. Like I said, do you have any, like, passion for a hobby or something that you're really excited about doing?
Something that gives you a purpose that you love to do.
Yeah. Some of them give back, and some of them, like, oh, I'm really looking forward to bringing my son and his son to the ball games on the weekends or something. Perfect. But some of them have a very sterile response. They have not thought about getting out, which is Joe's first chapter, which is think free. And so you were going to jump in, Michael. Go for it.
All right. Well,
before you do, I just want to say one thing.
What's that?
You mentioned something about atheists not believing in God. Actually, I represented somebody who was an atheist, and he got a grant. And I said to him, well, you should thank your non-existent supreme being. And he burst out in laughter.
So, yeah, I was
Anyways,
about to...
I had to say that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to comment on that. So, through my time in prison, I've had friends of many faiths and no faiths. And most of them have been in some sort of 12-step group, whether it's Celebrate Recovery, or Gamblers Anonymous, Criminals, Gang Members Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, you name it, they've been in. And the theme for the higher power here isn't just some supernatural being that created all of this. For somebody who doesn't, say you don't believe in God, don't believe in a supreme creator, what do you believe in that gives you strength? So for me, I had a struggle for a long time with God because, I felt God gave me the short end of the stick with everything. So at one point in my life, I made a deal with him. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. Well, you saw how that worked. I ended up in prison after that. But what I did when I started finding my path back to having faith in my creator, I started off by finding faith and strength in the things around me that I loved and cherished. Part of my higher power became my kids. Part of my higher power became my family. Part of my higher power became my belief in who I wanted to be. Part of my higher power became my victim and his family and what I could do to make amends for that. It doesn't have to be some grand creator. It has to be something that gives you strength, that gives you faith in humanity and faith in the ability that you can grow. And that's what the higher power really comes down to it. They say in the higher power or the God as you understand him. It doesn't have to be a divine supreme being. Find something to give you strength and start with that as part of your higher power. And that's really the importance of it.
Wow.
This is so great that I got him on this. The timing is impeccable for the show on your chapter. I mean, really, this is like I said, the embodiment of these steps. And have you read the book, the big book as well?
I have the big book for Gamblers Anonymous that I use.
Okay.
And it runs through a lot of insight into the steps, what they mean, how to use them. And it was a good guidepost. I mean, even for somebody who's been working through this for as long as I have in the various other groups, it's a nice refresher. And then going through and reading the stories of the people that struggled before me, that shows me that in my addiction to gambling and the daily struggles, and these struggles have really kind of actually increased since I've been out here. Because every time I walk into a convenience store to get a soda, there's lottery tickets everywhere. Every time I turn on the TV or turn on my phone, ads are popping up for gambling sites. So, the triggers are everywhere. And that's why it's so important to keep reminding yourself to use your book, your big book, whatever it's for CGA, Gamblers Anonymous, AA, NA, whatever it is, take time to read it. I have it sitting on my dresser, so it's the first thing I see every morning. So I pick it up, I read a little bit, put it down, and then start my day. Because without that, I kind of leave myself vulnerable because I didn't have my daily reminder. And that's what recovery is all about is, reminding ourselves that our triggers are out there, to be aware of them, but also have the tools in place to deal with them when they come. So, that's very important.
Are the 12 steps, is there steps in there to help with coping strategies, or is that something that's better supplemented somewhere else?
Well, I think for me, the 12 steps was the guideline on how to live my life. All right. It was the guideline of how to go from being in pre-contemplation with my addiction, working through maintenance. It's a perfect roadmap.
Wow.
But now, sitting in groups, people teach coping skills, and you're not going to find every coping skill you want in one spot. That's one thing I discovered the hard way. I was looking for all the answers in one spot when I first started, and it doesn't work, because I found I get into groups and there's a lot of things in that group that just really don't help me. But there's that one little hidden nugget that I take out of that group that made it all worthwhile. And that's one reason that over the years, I mean, Elizabeth's on my parole packet. I've done, oh God, like 25, 30 groups in the last 15 years. And that was just the groups that I participated in, not the groups I facilitated. And that's because there's something there that I needed to learn. And it's sad because when I first came in, I was on level 4 yard. And the only two groups that the yard politics would allow us as white inmates to participate was AA and NA, because that's the one place everybody on the yard could get together in one room and going past kites, past drugs, all that stuff. And I mean, they were abusing the system. And it's, looking back on it, it's heartbreaking. And I'm so grateful that that culture is changing. Recovery is becoming more of a predominant society inside the prison walls than the hardcore criminal mentality. We're pushing them out slowly and steadily. Because, I've talked to guys that, one of the guys that I'm in a program with here did 30 years out of a 46-year sentence in the SHU. He was that guy. He was that guy, man. He was a vato. He was down. He was ready to jump at a moment's notice. And he got out of that and got into recovery. I got out of being just a straight wannabe yard dog idiots, part of the idiot army, as I called them, because all they want to do is be violent, commit crime in prison. It took me years to get out of that. So, and I think the big lesson here is, if I can make this change, as messed up as I was, as violent and angry and broken and bent as I was, there's a chance for everybody to do it. Because, all you guys get to see right now is the person sitting in front of you. And I just, part of me wishes I had video of that person back then. Because if you could see that person and this person sitting right side by side talking to you, the change would be phenomenal. But that goes back to my 3 promises. It wasn't easy. It was painful, but it was worth it. So, it's just important that everybody understands hope is what gets us through this.
I was curious about remind me about your first denial. Why were you denied?
Well, the first time there were a couple of issues. First and foremost on their list was I had a gambling relapse in 2020 during a COVID lockdown. So one of my big triggers is boredom. And being locked down, I found myself just bored out of my head. So it was the start of football season. One of the guys was going around, "Hey, I'm doing football tickets. You want one?" "Sure, I'll do it. I'm bored." So I filled it out, turned it in, gave the guy my $1, and then just sat there and stewed for about 3 days. It's like, what the hell am I doing? So I get up, went up to him and said, "Man, just keep the ticket, keep the money, whatever. I can't do this." And went up and sat down and spent about 3 hours with my accountability partner talking it through. So, not facing it right away put me in that state of mind to where I was starting to get frustrated and angry again, because I wasn't being accountable for my relapse. And once I went up there and started talking to my accountability partner and working through my emotions and my feelings about it, I was able to get back on track. But yes, I had a relapse within 2 years of that board, which was a big thing. And then early on, when I did my psych eval about 8 months before I went to board, there's going to come times in this process where you're just going to go through something that puts you through a lot of stress, and we're going to fall back on some of our old negative coping skills if we don't catch ourselves. And that's what I did. So during my psych eval, my comprehensive risk assessments, I felt like I'd been drugged through the ringer, forward, backwards, upside down. I mean, I was raw. And by time we got close to the end, after about 2.5 hours of this, it got to the point where she started asking me about my gambling addiction, and it's like, yeah, it really wasn't that big of a deal. I could have controlled it any times I want, and I really didn't gamble at the table so much. It was more of playing tournaments and finding every way I could to deny and justify my addiction. And at that point in that interview, my denial management just went right out the window, because at the time I was feeling about 2 inches tall, and I just wasn't going to have any more. Instead of taking a breath, using my positive coping skills, and being accountable, I minimized. And that's what the board really focused on. So here I am. I have a gambling relapse within 2 years. I went into my CRA and minimized. And, that really just kind of got me a kick in the ass. So with that, when I went into the boardroom, the board asked me if there's anything I would like to say before we started. And at that point, I came forward and said, during the comprehensive risk assessment, I had, a moment of weakness where I fell back into old criminal thinking and denial, and this is what happened, and explained it to them. And, they said, okay, gotcha. And then at the end of it all, when the hearing was over and they were going through some of the things that they wanted to tell me, they gave me a roadmap. And I can't describe it any better than that, but it was a roadmap. But he said, we appreciate your honesty and your transparency and the things we talked about today. We appreciate the fact that you were honest about your risk assessment before we even started. We really appreciate the fact that even though we didn't know about your gambling relapse, that you came forward and put yourself in a negative light as far as the relapse. It shows that you've grown. But at this point, there's too many crosses to that nexus that we have to give you a 3-year denial. And the funny thing is, when that denial came, I walked out of that room with a spring in my step, my head held up high, and I got back to the yard. People were seeing me come back onto the yard, and everybody's running, oh, Mike got a date, Mike got a date. And, I talked to some of the people that I knew, and they were all really PO'd that I didn't get a date. And they're like, why aren't you mad? How can I be mad? They told me exactly what I needed to do to get out of there. But more importantly, they let me unburden myself. They let me take all this weight off my shoulders. And now I can focus on nothing but getting out of here. I don't have to focus on all the stupid little stuff that got me to where I am, got me in prison, because now I've done that. Now they've heard it, and they've heard it honestly. So, after I walked out of that first board hearing, I felt clean for the first time in my life.
Mm.
So, and then I just followed their roadmap this time. They laid it out: denial management, criminal gang members anonymous, gamblers anonymous. So the first thing I did, a couple of days after I got back to the yard and decompressed from the hearing, I went to the chapel and got the prep work for denial management. And I had that done within 3 weeks, sent in. And then I turned around and taught a class on it. And then after that, I did another round of CGA with ARC, and then I did the CGA workbooks. And then turned around, I couldn't find a Gamblers Anonymous group to participate in, so I started my own.
Wow.
It's if you take this stuff seriously and you dedicate yourself to it and you go in there honestly, there's no reason a person should get denied. As long as they've been doing the work to show the growth and they do what they have to do to get the tools they need. Which brings me to something that's, has come up a lot since I went to board. I've seen it probably 36 times. When we talk about accountability and we talk about amends. Well, they didn't ask me this question in board, but I addressed it in my parole packet about restitution. I laid out a plan to pay my restitution. They didn't ask me about it. But a lot of people are getting denied right and left because they're having people send money, to somebody else's books. So they don't have to pay that restitution and they can get their full $100 in canteen. Or they're collecting money from people because they don't have restitution. Well, come on, guys. I was reading the Mule Creek newspaper that they had on the tablet while I was in there. Guy went to board. They asked him about it. He's like, yeah, I did it last year. Not only did he get denied, but they started an investigation, and he ended up pleading to 2 more years. This is...
You froze. You're frozen, Michael.
We have to face our responsibility and our amends head on. Accountability, people. If you're doing this right now, stop. Sending money to other people's books to avoid restitution or being the one that it comes to, you're part of a criminal conspiracy. That's criminal thinking. That's a behavior that's going to keep you in prison. And if you somehow, like Elizabeth said, slip through the cracks, it's going to be what brings you back to prison. Don't do it. It's not worth it. And if you have been doing it, when you go into that boardroom, cop to it. Own it. Grab a hold of it with both hands and say, this is what I did. Yeah, you may get a denial right now, but next time you go up for board, they're going to look at that and go, yeah, you know what? He was truthful with us. He was accountable, and he hasn't done anything since, and he did what we asked him to do to rectify that. That's what it's going to take to get out. But stay away from these restitution scams. It's not worth it.
I had a couple of grants recently when the guys fessed to it, but they had such an otherwise decent packet that the panel said no nexus, you were honest. They're still going to do a full investigation, of course, to see if he's being truthful about when and where it happened and how much money, because a lot of questions were asked: how much money, how long, this and that. So again, to all the family members out there, and I've had guys tell me, well, my family refuses to send me money, and said, okay, well, your family then are criminals. So because it's a conspiracy, exactly, Michael, like what you said, it's a conspiracy to defraud the system. It's just fair and square. I mean, it's like me giving the guy the money on the street because he's homeless and he's struggling and he's just down on everything. It's none of my business if I decide to part with my $20 to give the man $20, what he does with it. Perhaps I'm enabling, perhaps I'm not, but it's none of my business. So if you want to send your loved one some money, what they do with it ultimately is their business, and their business may result in a denial of parole if they use that money to buy drugs, buy phones, whatever you guys use your money for. Not you anymore, Michael. And then,
Nope.
Or whatever it is, the scheming or whatever you guys, all the stuff that goes on in there. But as a family member, it's the same $20. Now that oh, you're taking 55%. Yeah, that's part of the deal. I mean, and families, we don't talk about this a lot because it's sort of verboten, but most of these families are responsible for generational abuse that created I don't know how to say it, as Joe could probably say it more diplomatically than me, but you're lighting the fuse. Okay. Now, does the person in prison, did they have choices? Yeah. Not so much though at 5 years old, 7 years old, when you're using them as a punching bag, or you're doing your drugs, or you're doing whatever 20 years ago. And I've had very few parents just be really accountable for their own part, their own role that they played in all of this. So you owe that money. I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody, but we really have to think about this as a real life cycle of violence issue. That's these adverse childhood events, is this generational trauma going on. So anybody out there who's listening, a couple dozen people rotating, listening to the show, think about your own stuff. I've had my two clients on the show very early on. We spent a year together, and they said, we're out here, we've done the work, we've done all this self-help. But he said, you know what, Comeau, no one out here is doing any work. They're all broken. They just know how to sidestep either committing crimes or getting caught for whatever their criminal behavior is, or their dysfunction. It doesn't always have to amount to criminal behavior, but maybe those are harsh words. Maybe my true personality came out in that statement, but I know that we sidestep that as a reality of the situation. So send the money to your loved one. It's going to go toward restitution. Whether the state uses that money as they should, okay, none of our business. Again, not our business. Just stop committing crimes and helping your loved ones commit crimes in prison, because you're potentially setting them back 3, 5, 7 years from being released and coming home to help you with your financial situation as well.
Right. Well, and as good intentioned as some of those family members can be, well, I want him to be able to get all $100 worth of canteen, or this or that or the other. There's an old saying that my granddad used to use: the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's just the bottom line there.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
You may be thinking you're helping your family member by getting them a few extra soups or, whatever, but you're not. What you're doing is making a possible link for them to be in there longer, and that means you're going to have to send them more money for soups.
More money for soups.
Those soups aren't worth it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good economical point. It's just more money for soups now, people. And you don't need the soups. Just go to the cafeteria, pick around whatever you can manage to eat in that cafeteria, and save your money. Save your money. You don't need Snickers. You don't need those soups, which are toxic as hell. You don't need it. It's all garbage that you're buying from the canteen in general, other than maybe some good coffee. But even then, it's like, step 8, step 9, make a list of all the victims you harmed, make amends. Are you making amends by, needing your Starbucks coffee at the canteen, or should you just drink the swill, carry on with your day and get to work and go to your self-helps and just, count the days until you're out? I don't know. I haven't been in prison. I would probably be one of those that were needing all the soups and stuff too. I'm just saying it as a perspective. And, steps, I think humility, I got to cheat. Step 7, right? Being humble to the process, taking your lumps, and this is about the victims ultimately. This isn't about you, the inmate. The inmate, got a life sentence. And so really this is about, at the end of the day, what have you done to make it right for the victims in your community before we say, okay, we'll give you a second chance on the outside. But there you go. I just added a little heavy. Fix it up, Joe. You always help me fix it up.
No, you guys are great. I think I feel sorry for any of the families who didn't tune into this, who won't watch it when it's online, because you guys gave such great insights there into everything: accountability, internalization, making amends, victim impact, remorse.
We covered it.
Topics, and you guys. I'm in the company of giants here, so.
Well, I mean, Michael is he's a standout as far as clients go. I mean, he's a rare, very rare person who really, Joe, you and I always say repetition is the key to mastery, and that's not, memorization is not the key to mastery, but repetition, meaning using it every day. Use these 12 steps, use the principles you learn from Gogi every day, use the principles XYZ every day, and really embrace rehabilitation for yourself, just your loved ones, just to be a better person, and you, the audience, the family members, to be better. And so that we can get away from this separation model that they've created for us with all the fear-based messaging, programming, social engineering, and all of that. They just want us to live in fear. And you do that by not growing as a person. Next week, we are going to strategy 9, Joe, internalization of your self-help. My favorite topic, becoming the better you. I'm going to send, Michael is a big hit as far as we're concerned. I'm just technologically really challenged here today. I don't know if you can hear me.
No, I thank you, Elizabeth. And you know what? I hope, Elizabeth, that you, bring Michael back another, in the future sometime.
Well, it's up
I'd love
to
to
him.
be back.
I'll send him the link, and it really helped my clients, Michael. My client and a cellmate of his that got out. He wasn't actually my client; he was the client of Tracy Lum. But he and we all became pretty close over that year, and they said that these weekly check-ins was a form of accountability as well, because they had to come and say, this, like you said today, this isn't as easy as I thought it would be, and that kind of thing.
So for anybody out there who just wants kind of a little roadmap, I wrote kind of a primer. It's called Serving Life. It's not about serving life in prison. It's about serving life.
Ooh.
We take so much from life on a daily basis. It's time to serve. So what it is, it's a primer on working through recovery, starting with the very first step, asking for help. It's 19 short chapters with worksheets at the end of each chapter and journaling exercises. And it's,
get my screen off.
I'm working on, as soon as I get my laptop here in the next week, I'm going to be doing some final edits and working on getting it published. But if anybody wants a copy of it with its flaws right now and its typos, please contact Ms. Comeau's agency. And she has free right to copy it and send it out to whoever wants a copy of it. It's there for you guys. And all I ask for any organizations that use it, there's an appendix at the back. Put your information in there for your organization so we can expand the resources that are available for it.
Great. Well, I'm going to do it. That's for sure.
Yeah, you let me know,
And-
Joe. I've got a PDF. I've got it PDF. I
Okay.
have sent it to one person.
Thank you. And does it have your contact information on there, Michael, as well?
It does not, because I didn't have information like that then.
Oh,
In fact, if I can get Elizabeth to send me a copy of that PDF also, that would help me get started greatly.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll get your
It's
contact
really
information.
great. Some of this stuff is really great. Really great questions and things. It's just from a kind of a different angle. It's not the same stuff.
Mhm.
It's more spiritually, more about yourself and things. Yeah.
Well, and I wrote it from my point of view, and
Mhm.
I don't use you language. I use I and we, because I want the people reading the book to understand that we are in this together,
Mm.
that I experienced this, and that we can do this. So, and I found that was very important. And a lot of the people that went through the class when I facilitated it in Avanoff really embraced it. So
I think we'll
it's
be
there.
doing a show on the 19 chapters after we get through these 36.
Awesome. I'd be more than happy.
It'd be fun. We're having
Yes,
fun with
absolutely.
Joe's book a lot. We're really having
Very
fun,
good.
learning a lot. Joe's using some of these shows, he said, to potentially later on do
Oh,
a
yeah. Mm-hmm. Got to do another edition of
third
36
edition of
strategies.
his book.
Yeah.
And keep your eyes out. In probably the next 6 or 8 months, I will be hopefully getting the foundation for Serving Life up and running. I've got a lot of legwork still to do, but we're getting there slowly and surely.
Great.
Thank you both. Thank you to all of the audience that will tune in later throughout the week. And we will see you next week. Like I said, strategy 9, internalization. Michael, if he's available, will come.
Absolutely.
And we'll just, I'll end stream and then hang tight, Michael, for 1 second after I hit end. Thank you, audience. Bye-bye.
All right.